Shombi, this is obviously very difficult times for the United Nations, not just across the world, but also perhaps as we go forward in New York itself. But luckily you're here with us in India. And perhaps you can start by saying one of the things that Archana said is the need for conservation and preservation and the need to sort of, in many ways, clean up our act. We are on the Ganga, and I know that the UN has done a lot of work in Project Ganga and the Clean Ganga project. If you wanted to talk a little bit about why that's been important and what's the progress on that.
Thank you very much, Sanjoy. And let me first just say, मुझे Mahindra Kabira festival में आकर बहुत खुशी हुई. And
he speaks better Hindi than me, just for the record.
आप सभी को UN परिवार की तरफ से मेरा नमस्कार to everyone. And I wanted to, I'll be honest, I'm not naturally a morning person. So I want to thank you for making one, because today was absolutely spiritual. And I'm so glad that I got up early enough to experience that. So I think that, the Secretary General of the United Nations, we're doing everything that we can. And of course, we are a member states-based organization. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is constantly, ringing the alarm bell, saying, hey, we are waging war on nature, and nature is fighting back. And this is a suicidal war because, of course, we are just killing ourselves. So we've seen the consequences are enormous. We've seen, I think, the 12 hottest months, sort of on record. It used to be, we would think, once in 5 years, 10 years or something. Now, if you want to know the hottest month, you just look at the previous one. The hottest year, you look at the previous one. And hottest in 100,000 years, I think, have been some estimates. Life under the seas, the coral reefs are dying out. It's a massive extinction because of the warming of the seas, the coral bleaching. If you look at glaciers, for example, glacier mass in the world has lost more mass in this past year than in the last 50 years, basically.
47%.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. And so we're looking at rivers, for example. It's not just the oceans, it's the rivers. Ganga is under major stress. We look at the Amazon basin, we look at the Mississippi River in the US as well. Some of them are at the lowest levels that they've ever been recorded. So, and this is about sustenance, obviously, of all of life, including human life too. So we speak about the eternal flow of the Ganga. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to ensure that it remains eternal, because it's not necessarily a given fact. We see it, the trends. So it's today we must caretake for the future generations.
One of the things you spoke about is the attack in many ways on the planet itself. And we're seeing wars, we're seeing hunger, and we're seeing also a reluctance to accept that this is about climate crisis. Some countries, including America, sort of tend to protest that there is something called climate crisis. What is the narrative that we're missing, especially in this part, that we're not able to make this climate crisis idea sexy enough for people to want to get some action done? What are we missing?
Well, I think, unfortunately, climate, like many sort of public goods, this is a wicked problem when we look at psychology and economics, right? It's very easy to adopt a beggar thy neighbor approach. I think somebody once said, diplomacy, it's about the art of letting others, get your deal. And that's the wrong approach. That's zero sum as we know it. Now, part of the problem in terms of climate, if we look at climate in particular, here there's a very important temporal aspect to it. So at the moment, India, for example, oftentimes is sort of criticized as being, maybe the third largest polluter or something like that. But if we understand that India has, 1/6 of humanity, and if we see the historical emissions are something like 4%. So India and developing countries have nowhere near claimed as much of that carbon budget as they should have. Unfortunately, it's the high-income countries who became very wealthy at a time before all of this was understood, who really took most of that climate, that carbon budget, right? So what we need to do now, there are these concepts of, common but differentiated responsibilities. The whole COP process is based on this, on the developed world providing additional support in terms of financing, accessible financing, technology transfers, to help the developing world make this green transition. And you see the appetite is enormous. India is, I don't think there's a more exciting place in terms of investments in green energy and renewable energy, in electric mobility, in green hydrogen. The electric vehicle sales, I think, almost doubled, or something like, increased 50% in the past year alone. But like developing countries across the world, this needs to be financed. And so that's the number one issue right here and now, is that we need to make finance available at affordable rates. Still, developing countries pay much, much more for cost of capital than high-income countries. So that's where we get to reform of UN system, reform of multilateral development banks, the international financial architecture as well. That's the need of the hour.
COP. Absolutely. COP itself has had a checkered history in terms of its successes. In the more recent COP discussions, countries weren't able to agree on the financial package and how best to sort of address this huge issue that needs to be addressed. A lot of folks across the world look to the UN. The UN in itself can't act because UN is really the states, the many countries coming together, and it's upon them to act. And yet you guys get the blame. You guys get the shtick in a sense. Does that narrative also need a change? Because everybody seems to look at you as the punching bag without addressing the problem that's within, the ideas of the countries themselves.
Sure. Well, I think that, again, it's not to absolve of responsibility by any means. But when you look at the, some failures, and there are many, of the UN system, the institution itself, that's one thing. At the same time, we have to keep in mind that the UN across the world is helping, support 110 million people who have had to flee their homes from conflict and crisis. The UN is helping to vaccinate nearly half of the world's children, these sorts of things. But when it comes to the political decisions, this is fully the member states. And, and we have many member states here present. I see ambassadors, Mael in Norway and Philip from Australia and others. Somebody, I think it was Shashi Tharoor actually, who I heard say that an analogy for the UN, both an actor and a stage. So the UN is a stage for the member states, and India, of course, being incredibly important. When the member states agree, then the UN becomes an actor. And the point is, it's absolutely correct and right to highlight the shortcomings of this dual role, but not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So Madeleine Albright has said that if we didn't have a UN, we'd need to create one. And so it's very important to understand that we need to improve and reform, but not to give up on multilateralism. Now we have a lot of new growth in terms of what are called minilaterals. So you see G20 expanding. India played an important role in bringing the African Union into that. You see BRICS expanding as well. And I think that's very important, and this is all very complementary. It's like a table. You need the feet and the legs, and also you need the broad space. But it should not be seen as one in place of the other as well. And India is playing an incredibly important role in this, given many, many different factors in its voice.
From global coming back to local, what can we do? What can each person here do to help with the environmental issue? Is there a role that each one of us has, and if so, what can that be?
Well, so I think first of all, we're right here in front of the Ganga. So, and you mentioned earlier Namami Ganga. This is an initiative that was launched by government together with communities back in 2014, has been named an environmental flagship program by the United Nations. But the model there is about understanding the importance of uniting heritage and culture and historical knowledge with modern scientific knowledge, as we were just learning about. And a big part of that is understanding the role of each individual person. Again, if we look at India broadly speaking, India has not been the problem and is not the problem, so to speak, at the moment. If consumption and development increases in the same way it is now, then in 10 years, 20 years, something like that, India will be a very big problem, right? But India has a unique chance to complete the development trajectory in the right way, an absolutely unique chance. So everybody here, whether you're a citizen, because 2/3 of climate emissions actually come from household-based decision-making. The decisions you make, the Prime Minister's Lifestyles for the Environment initiative, for example, really focuses on that mindful consumption, doing all of the things that you're doing as well, many of these things in our partnership also. But 2/3 of India's cities are yet to be built. 2/3. I mean, this is unbelievable, the amount of demand, increase in energy demand that will be coming. So in terms of if you're going to be a citizen of anywhere in the world and have an important role to play in our human trajectory, then being a citizen of India, living here and playing a role in this process, there's really no more important role, I think, as we look forward.
One of the things, as I mentioned yesterday, that we've been doing here in Varanasi, and of course the teamwork in Mahindra, is really working with partners like Scrap. And Scrap looks at how can we get to zero waste, and we've been working with them for 8 years. So I'm going to invite him up onto stage to come and share some of what they've been doing and take you through the process so you understand what you need to do. Some years ago at an entertainment conference, I have long hair, so I get to be president of many of these things. We got them to do an audit. So there were, I think, 350 delegates at this conference in Jaipur, in the Fairmont Hotel. And in the evening, they came and told us that these 350 people had consumed 6,500 bottles or plastic bottles of water, the small bottles, and most of them just a sip or half a bottle. And these 350 people had wasted 1,600 kgs of food. That was the audit. So we explained to people that evening, and next day when they audited it, the number of bottles came down to about 900 from 6,500. The idea was if you picked up a plastic bottle, you finish the water rather than take a sip and put it down. And when you served yourself at the buffet, you then took what you thought you could consume at that point and then returned if you were feeling hungry. So just very simple processes like that. But I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about what they've been doing here in Varanasi over the last few years and this time.
Hi, I'm Ayad from Scrap. Hello and good afternoon to you all. So at Scrap, we are very proud to be the sustainable partners at this beautiful Mahindra Kabira festival. And we are at this ghats of Banaras and on the banks of River Ganga. We understand and acknowledge the responsibilities towards our environment. And for the last 7 years, Mahindra Kabira Festival is trying to be a zero waste and a single-use plastic-free festival. And so we would love if you help us and support us to make this festival as a zero waste festival by following just 3 simple steps. One is to segregate your waste into right bins. Second, using the reusable water bottles that you have received in the delicate kits by just refilling it at the water stations. And third, by minimizing the food waste. And if you have any questions, you can please reach out to us. Our team is in green jackets. Thank you. Thank you.
To continue what he said, so after we finish our day or our afternoon, he and his colleagues then sort out the waste, further segregate it, and see how they can be compacted or landfill or whether it can be put into compost. So that's what they do, and they track it all the way till the end. In the early years, the Varanasi Municipal Corporation didn't have such a system either, so they've been really helping doing that. So thank you so much, Shombi Sharp. Thank you so much, Scrap and Arhat, for being part of this journey. We're going to continue this conversation with Purushottam Agarwal on Kabir and his philosophy in just a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And if I could just close with what I always like to say is that SDGs दुनिया में मुमकिन होंगी क्योंकि इंडिया में मुमकिन होंगी. So that's the role that you can play. But to make that happen, kal kare so aj kare so ab. If we don't do what we can do today right now, then the moment may pass.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.